Shalom, shalom. First, I want to start off by giving all honor, praises, and infinite glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. I want to give double honors into the elders, apostles, and bishops of GMS Great Millstone, who rule well, teach, and edify, and peace and blessings to you sincere Akim Akwat in this house of the faith. My name is Ishaya. I'm the young bro from the GMS Arizona Church in Ottawa, Matazah. Going to make an edifying video. Lord willing, going to name this virtual epistle battle formation. Battle formation. In the world they'll say, offense will win games, but defense wins championships. And ultimately, in this truth, we understand that we're just men. The Apostle Paul spoke of that in Romans the 7th chapter. Oh, I wretched man. It's the scriptures talk about in Psalms. That ye are gods, but ye shall die as men. And considering all things, when we are presented a spiritual battle, when we go to spiritual war, there's a way of, how to conduct that fight. You have to think spiritually on, how to fight that spiritual battle. The scriptures say, this is an end transit, so I'm going to be quoting a few things. So Baba Shai, bear with me. But the scriptures say, do all things decently and in order. Even in accordance to how you're supposed to fight off Satan, the spiritual demon Satan, when he comes upon you, when certain things come upon you. I was watching the live stream. The elder Apostle Tahar did a video today, and the elder Yashawamba and the elder Apostle Ramlab did a in transit lesson. And while they were doing the in transit lesson, the tire popped, and they went into the Apostle Ramlab doing that gem, like you gotta get in your post. You gotta throw up those prayers first and foremost, and get in that trench, prepare that defense. So we understand in this truth that your first thing when you going through hell, man, you gotta pray. That's the first act of success. Because what else would you be doing? What are your thought processes are when you're skipping that? Spirituality begins at doing that which is unto the Lord, and not which is under carnality. Carnality is doing things that are not upon the law, that are not of the law. And the scriptures talk about how you should lean upon the Lord and lean not on thine own understanding in Proverbs the 3rd chapter. As a matter of fact, I probably will get that. This is Proverbs 3, and I'm going to start at verse 4. Salak. It says, so shalt thou find. Salak. I'm going to start a little higher. This page not being there is kind of tripping me out too. Hold on. Whatever, we'll work with it. This is Proverbs 3 and verse 3. It says, let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck. Write them upon the table of thine heart. It says, so thou shalt find favor and good understanding in the sight of the Lord and men. And mercy and truth. Mercy, we pray to the Lord, to beg for mercy, to beg the Lord to ultimately deal, man. And it says, and bind them about thy neck, write them upon the table of thy heart, so thou shalt find good understanding in the sight of the Lord and men. It says, trust in the Lord with all thine understanding, and lean not thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him. So you're acknowledging the Lord throughout your day. You go through your daily hells, your daily tests, and the bullshit and whatnot. How much more would it be necessary, especially during times of war? Are you your own defense? We all know that the mind is deceitful above all things. The scriptures say the heart is deceitful above all things. That word heart goes in the word la'ab. Not la'ab, lab. Which goes into ultimately to your mind. It's deceitful. It's going to tell you lies. It's going to tell you, ultimately to do what's comfortable. Okay? But when you're thinking in the spirit, you pray to the Lord to give you the strength, to act as your defense. Defense wins championships because, in this truth too, defense will have you to stay steadfast and keep going and let the Lord be your offense. Okay, let the Lord be, your avenger. The scripture says, he who avenges us is near, roughly paraphrasing. The Lord is the avenger of our brethren, as the scriptures say. But there's one that goes into he who justifies us is near. So ultimately, we just have to use that shield and buckler, man. You know, really using that defense from the Lord, that mercy and truth, you know, to our advantage to, you know, ultimately overtake Satan. Because what did Job do in his time? She said, why don't you curse the Most High and die? And he said, you know, woman, you speak as a foolish woman. You know, we've received good at the Lord. Shall we not receive evil also? It's like, it's, you know, you would think it's a simple thing, but when you're going through all these different vexations, you know, carnality can take over if you're not taking heed to yourself, man. You know, you can get bugged out, you know, and totally forget to pray. You know, brothers talk about it all the time, how they forget to pray, you know, before they come and go places, before they drive somewhere. Pray before you eat. You know, things like that are small. You know, ultimately we got to try to do better in you know, turning to prayer of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, because during these times we're going to need the Lord. It's not of, you know, it'd be nice to have the Lord. You're going to need the Lord, bro. There's no other way through this thing, man. It's going to be all out hell. It says, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Because we know in the Proverbs as well, the Lord directed the path to the saints. It says, be not wise in thine own eyes, fear the Lord and depart from evil. It shall be health to thy navel and marrow to thy bones, which gives you strength and marrow, you know, health, you know, which equates to growth as well, man. Honor the Lord with thy substance and with thy first fruits of all thine increase. And the best way you can do that is thanking the Lord in this society, man. You know, if you get a blessing, man, you know, pray to the Lord, thank the Lord. You know, don't be on that, you know, entitlement demon, man. Entitlement shit, you know, because that main character syndrome, you know, let us be nothing and let us make the Lord something. You know, that type of spirit is, you know, what we got to take heed to. You know, I'm nobody important. You know, I'm hoping that the Lord, you know, has me to be important. I'm hoping I'm important to the Lord. You know, set up thy, you know, goods in heaven. You know, that type of thing. But really, it's all that personal relationship with the Lord, man. How can the Lord be intimate with you? How can the Lord deal with you if you never speak to him? If you're never, you know, talking to him? If you're never, you know, throughout your day acknowledging him and his presence in your life? You know, how could you possibly be, you know, really locked in with the Lord? You know, think about your father. You know, relationship with your father, you know, a father that you never talk to or a father that you always talk to. Who's going to give you more wisdom? All right? Because your father don't owe you shit. You know, he just makes sure that there's a roof over your head, you fed, and you grow up. You know, and he makes sure that you know right from wrong. But, you know, your father has a lot of wisdom, but a man that doesn't speak to his father ain't gonna get that wisdom. And that's why you have a lot of these, you know, loser ass Jakes walking around, you know, with the single mother household, you know, totally hate their father and want to talk smack on their father because their mother did growing up. They never tap into the wisdom of their father, you know, which is the greater wisdom of the two, you know, even in according unto us. You know, tap in with the Lord, man. Stay locked in and speaking to Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, you know, so that he may, you know, deal, so that he can see, you know, ultimately the Spirit of the Lord is quick and powerful, dividing like a two-edged sword, dividing the spirit and soul asunder, you know, the thoughts and intents of the heart. There's nothing you can hide from the Lord. All that ickiness, all that nasty shit, you know, all that, you know, I don't know, you bros ever ate chicken, that black meat on the chicken? All that stuff that's in you, the Lord knows it's there. You know, it's nothing you can hide, but what you can do is you can turn to the Lord to address these things. And when Satan comes upon you, you know, sometimes that darkness within you try to come out. But the Spirit of the Lord will interject. And you'll learn and you'll repent and you'll get away from evils. You know, so that there be light found within you. That's the translation between being reborn into the truth, man. You know, it's John 3:3. Because people in the world aren't worried about praying to the Lord. You ask the average person how much they pray, you know, so-called wacky-tacky Christians, they'll be like, oh, I pray like once every other day. What? You know, that's crazy. It says, and Yahweh answered unto them and says, verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of Yahweh. Being born again, you know, as an infant, you know, looking at their parents, you know, you being born into the truth, you know, you now recognize, you know, who your true spiritual family is, man. Who your spiritual father is. You know, who your elders are, who your real family is, the brotherhood. You understand what the body is. And now you have a whole nother respect for this truth, and you carry your life within that. And light is brought up in you. You know, and that's why it's so important to make sure that, you know, you stay defensed up, because we got to, you know, go back to the original topic, because Kind of went on a tangent, Salakia. But Ephesians 6:10. It says, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of the Lord that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. You know, what good is it putting on the armor of the Lord too? You know, if you're going to skip the very first thing you should do. You know, you're going to put on the whole armor, but then you're going to forget, like, you know, your undergarments. You'll be chafing and shit. I'm playing. But, you know, really it has to start at prayer, man. It has to start at, you know, firstly asking the Lord and setting up that first line of defense. Because, you know, you're not your own defense. Neither are you an offense. It's the spirit of Yahweh Shem Yahushai that is upon you, and the spirit of the Lord that is upon the things that go around you. You know, how many 2/3 ninjas, nigroids, and niggettes have probably wanted to steal your car or do something bad to you or wanted to start a nigga moment with you? You know, how many times have your coworkers have plotted to get you fired or come against you? How many times has your wife, you know, thought about committing adultery on you? How many times is, you know, X, Y, and Z, Z, Y, and X, man, all these different things that happen here in Babylon the Great. How many times have these things could have happened, but the Lord had mercy upon you? And think about the prayers that you say and how they could have had, you know, clemency to the situations that, you know, came about you. You know, you may go through something here in the future that the Lord is requiring for you to pray for now. If the Spirit is upon you to address something about yourself, like, hey, I need to stop drinking so much. Hey, I need to start reading more. You know, maybe the Lord is preparing you for the battles that you're going to face soon. That you have to be more wise and sober than you had to be before. But if you ignore those things and you skip those prayers, when it comes time for you to go through those battles, you're going to be weak, feeble, and you're going to get your ass whooped. Because the Lord going to hurt you, man. The Lord going to whoop that ass. The Lord is, you know, not slack to do that. And he's justified in it because ultimately, man, in this flesh, we do the wrong thing from time to time, and we have to take heed. That first line of defense is prayer. You know, think about, you know, the prayer that you do today could be the one that saves your life tomorrow. You know, the prayer that you do today is the, you know, the one that could keep you in his truth for another day. The prayer that you skip today could be the same prayer as why you lose your leg. You know, you never know, man. You know, just putting it like that. Because ultimately, we're all operating under the will of the Lord. So within that, we beg to the Lord through prayer that he has mercy upon us. And that we may maintain, that we may stay in this truth, stay spiritual. All right, even in this carnal ass world, man. You know, fighting those carnalities and putting spirituality at the forefront of our minds. Put on the whole armor of the Lord that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. A simple definition for the word principalities. Let me get it in the Edom Online. Okay. And this is what? Not even where I searched up. We'll just get principality. It says position of a prince, government, a rule. It's not really what I wanted to. I'm just gonna get a simple definition because that one didn't get where I wanted it to go. Damn, my Wi-Fi bugged out or something? Hold up, it's a lag. Phone is tripping. So like a rule, a spiritual power, an order of celestial angels, demonic force mentioned in biblical texts. That principality, man. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principality. We wrestle against rules. You know, demonic presences. You know, the angels. You know, spiritual power. An order of celestial angels. You know, that right now we're fighting in a war that we really, you know, you can't really see with the physical eye, but it's for sure there. You know, there's demons all over the place, as well as there's angels watching over you. And you're begging to the Lord that you have, you know, mercy within that. Because it only takes, you know, 1 second for everything to get turned totally upside down. Look at Job. When his whole situation changed, it was one thing after the other. You know? Let's get this. Actually, I'm going to skip that because it kind of goes off topic, but When Job was going through the things that he was going through, it was one thing after the next. Like the next messenger ran up during the speech of the current messenger. You know, you lost all of this, your children, they passed, you know, this and that and the third. And he was going through those things, and, you know, it was like, damn, You know, it's like liver punch after liver punch after liver punch. But, you know, you have to be spiritual to put the Lord first within all those things, because it's ultimately carnalities that we may lose here. You know, you might lose your car, you might lose your job. Well, we got to walk away from all this shit anyways. Because the only way to maintain this world and maintain in here is to submit to Esau, Edom, in which we, Lord willing, not going to do. Yeah, how will forbid, man? You know, but this is the preparation to be able to stand against that, to be able to stand boldly in the presence of those that have afflicted us, to be able to stand against the wiles of the devil, to be able to stand, you know, for righteousness and truth's sake, as true boldness. Boldness isn't, you wearing a leather jacket and walking around like Ice Cube and shit. You know, boldness is standing on what's true. You know, you might not have a super deep voice, super big old beard, and you might be, 6'10" strong ass guy. That doesn't make you bold. Boldness doesn't, mean you got to show out acting like, you a fucking dog in the heat. All right? Boldness is standing on truth. And that's what the Lord is establishing here in this earth, man. Men that are going to stand on truth. Men that are going to be able to honorably die about this thing. As sheep delivered unto the slaughter. Because that's what we truly are. We're not, we're not in that position of rulership now. We're not in that total authoritative state. Because we got to be changed for that. For these nations to be ruled over with just, unimaginable power. Right now, we're sheep delivered unto the slaughter. We're walking a like path like Yahweh Shai. This is that straight gate that, many be there find it, that few be there go without, that go about. Straight gate that's, so thin that only one man may go it at a time. This is a position of difficulty, and at the end of it, lies everlasting salvation, but there'll be great stumbling blocks even within that position. And we have to take heed and be spiritual about the type of, thing we're involved in. Because this is truly, this isn't, no feel-good doctrine. This is suffering. This is suffering, the cross. This is bearing a like mind of Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai. This ain't that Christian shit. To suffer for worldly gain, to suffer to, ultimately be delivered up in a rapture and all that shit. Like, bro, these Christians are through, man. Not only them, the rest of this world. This place is based in morality. But we have true understanding of the scriptures and true wisdom and true morals, which are backed by the spirit and power of Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai. And we are ordered to be able to put that to use. Be not hearers of the word, as it says in James, but doers also, as I believe it's James 1:21. But it says, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And just know Esau Edom is conjuring up those spirits, man. Know he's a confederate against you. That's Psalms 83rd chapter, Psalm 64, Ezekiel 35. This devil totally hates us, man. It's that Revelation 12 and 17, going all the way back to Genesis as well. Genesis the 3rd chapter. This devil ultimately has always hated us, and he's going to be conjuring up these spirits to come against us, to ultimately get us out of this thing. There's going to be trying to throw demons on you, man, trying to try you. But we have to be vigilant, and we have to stay prayed up. It says, therefore take unto you the whole armor of the Lord, that ye may be able to withstand the evil day, and that having done all to stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth. And that starts at prayer. Having on your breastplate of righteousness, and on your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Scriptures even talked about King David asked the Lord to enlarge his steps underneath him, so that your steps are sure, and that stepped on the foundation of ultimately the Lord, knowing that the Lord is the chief cornerstone, man. The Lord is our foundation that we walk thereupon, not in this world, man. It says above all taking the shield of faith, wherewith, and it says above all taking the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench the fiery darts of the wicked. And the shield of faith, you have to have faith that prayer is actually going to do something. Because the faithless are going to be like, whether I pray or not, I still got to deal with this myself. That type of spirit going to get you fucked up, straight up. Because I had a woman I was working with, and I told her that, hey, look, I can't work this day. I gotta go. You know what I'm saying? And she was like, I get you into that churchy stuff and this stuff and like that, but is the Lord gonna pay your bills? Is the Lord gonna, feed your family? Is the Lord gonna pay your retirement? And I just let her talk, because there's just nothing you can say to a fucking Salakia. That just pissed me off what she said. But there's nothing that you can say to an idiot like that, man. Shalaki for the vulgarity, but man, when she said that, I was irritated as all hell with her. Cause she a cool ass Jake, and you know, people really show you their true colors, man. But you know, you have to have faith that the Lord is actually going to come through, and He will come through. You know, the Lord has established a testimony within you of undoubtable, you know, presence of the Lord. You know, I've been put through a couple little situations myself where the Lord totally like all out hell, and then it just got solved like damn near overnight, man. The Lord's cold, and he will do that for, you know, those that are unto Him. You know, scriptures talk about, you know, the Lord will make even thy enemies at peace with thee. You know, those who do the will of the Lord, roughly paraphrasing. And it says, and take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, because that word cuts. Okay, that word cuts. That's how you're able to cut through the bullshit too. All right, there's things that you're gonna have that natural disposition to not go for. There's gonna be times Satan's gonna try to throw some dimes at you, that you through natural understanding, you just cut right through it. Let's see if I get this one. I think it's in Hebrews. Could be in Romans. This is Romans 2 and 14. It says, for when the Gentiles which have not the law do by nature the things contained in the law, these things have not the law, are the law unto themselves. So there's just like a natural disposition to do good. You know, though, and this Gentiles isn't talking about, you know, you heathen nations. It's ultimately talking about lost Israelites, man. Israelites in a Gentile state of mind. You know, so even when bros are scattered all throughout Babylon, all from these different walks, there's certain things that you still wouldn't go for. You have a natural disposition to good, natural disposition to godliness. And how much more when you come into this truth, and how much more required when you come into this truth, when the Lord tells you to do the right thing. Going back down to the sword, it says, and take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of the Lord. So using that, you know, you just skillful with you skillful with the word. You skillful with the sword. Like Peter cutting off that ear, like, you know, you're able to easily cut some of these things. But ultimately, it started at prayer. It started at fear of the Lord. You know, fear of the Lord is beginning of knowledge. You know, knowledge, you know, prayer. All these things go hand in hand, and we have to be doing these things. That's why it says be doers of the, you know, doers. Because you can't just not do one thing and do some other things and expect the whole thing. It says, the scriptures say, do nothing in partiality. You know, you do things in partiality in this truth, you're going to have Swiss cheese all over you, man. You're going to have holes here, and there. You know, and that's not what we want. We want to be, you know, in the spirit and power of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua. It says, praying always with prayer and supplication in the spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance of supplication for all saints. Praying always with all prayer and supplication in the spirit. And it says in the spirit, not in the flesh. You know, this is a spiritual thing that you do. In the spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for the saints. So, you know, watching after, being vigilant, and praying always. You know, this is what we're commanded to do. But I pray this lesson was edifying. I want to ask you to give all honor, praises, and infinite glory to Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua B'Shem Kakwadah.